So we have Nay Allen, who is our lower school counselor at Westchester Country Day School. Sabrina Winstead, who is our middle and upper school counselor at Westchester. Jen Sherman, who is at New Garden Friends School, counselor at New Garden Friends School. And Jasmine Fulp, who is at Daymark. And they are super excited to be here, and we are super excited to have them here. So I'm going to turn the show over to them.
All right, we have switched ourselves up a little bit. My colleague is losing her voice, so we're going to be real kind and gentle to her today. So we are really excited to be here. Welcome again. Probably all four of us are very, very passionate about all things centered around mental health and helping students and really caring to see our students have the very best possible year every year that they can have, and everything that we can do for that is what we want to do. So that's why we're all here today, to try to share some wonderful information. So one of the first things that he talks about in this book is the overprotection of our children in the real world and the underprotection of our children in the virtual world. So starting in the 1980s and 1990s, a culture of fearful parenting emerged, driven by news stories. Some were real, some were exaggerated, some were just completely fake news about dangers to children. This led to a dramatic shift in our parenting norms from what we see today, where physical and emotional safety became paramount, often at the expense of children's independence. Children disappeared from public spaces as parents became hesitant to lead them to have play that was unsupervised. Even in seemingly safe spaces or environments like their own homes or parks, everything was very structured and planned and organized. Parents began showing excessive control, shielding children from risks, and micromanaging their experiences. Well, one thing that we do know is that all of this came out of love and concern for our children, though it caused a lack of coping skills and irrational fears of the unknown in our students. Overprotected children often miss out on opportunities to face challenges and learn to cope with failure and disappointment, which are all very important things and skills to learn in life. This lack of experience can lead to increased anxiety when they encounter difficulties later on in life. When they are not exposed to new stimuli, they can struggle with fear of transitions or newness, and constantly being shielded from the world can separate and create a fear of what's out there, or that I'm going to be judged, or someone's not going to be kind to me and I don't know what to do in that situation. When children aren't encouraged to explore, they may develop a heightened sense of anxiety, that's our word of the day, about trying new things. Like, for example, learning to ride our bikes. When we were all growing up, probably a lot of us went out, we rode our bikes, we learned to ride our bikes, we got lots of bumps and bruises and fell down, and then we were riding our bike from after school until it got dark. Parents might not have known where we were, but it was all okay. We came home when it was dark and it was time to have dinner. Well, now we don't see that as much, and parents are so fearful of kids falling, of getting hurt, of injury, or just scared in general about they might be out of their sight for a few seconds, and then they miss out on this really amazing opportunity to experience something new and to feel confident with overcoming something that is a difficult challenge. And we know that they're going to have difficult challenges in life to come. And so some of these skills when they're younger are things that we want to help them learn and feel that they can do. So when we are underprotected in the virtual world, we've been busy shielding our children about all of these real world risks and supervising them in organized play and activities where there's always an adult around, which leads them to not be able to make some of those decisions when someone's unkind to them or when there's difficulty in the friend group. How do we work it out? How do we solve that problem? But in the meantime, we've been giving them devices, and we're giving them devices, and sometimes they're on those devices, and we might not always know what they're doing on those devices. And so we're neglecting them with the dangers that are lurking in the virtual world while we're overprotecting them in the real world. The rise of smartphones and social media has led to an explosion in screen time among adolescents, averaging over 7 hours a day outside of schoolwork on a device. This has come at the cost of face-to-face interaction, with time spent with friends plummeting. Social skills are hard. They are unsure of what to do, how to react. If someone says something or acts to them in a way that is unkind or they get a feeling about, they're not sure what to do with that feeling. And instead of being able to work through it like they would have done in some of that unsupervised play, now they have no idea what to do. And this is causing problems that we see. Social media, despite its claims of fostering connection, can actually contribute to feelings of loneliness and isolation. The virtual connection it offers often fails to match the richness of the real world in real-life communication with others. The constant validation, feedback loops, and social media platforms create an intense pressure to conform, distorting our perceptions, unrealistic expectations, and goals that they cannot obtain. So it's just like when we think about, I know I have a driver right now, and when they were learning how to drive, I didn't just go, hey, come on, let's go get in the car, here are the keys, show me what you got, right? We are very skilled at, we have driver's ed, we have books for them to read, we have hours that they have to do before they can even get their permit, and then you spend hours and months teaching them to drive. It's the same with our phones. A lot of times we're getting phones or devices, we're handing them over to students without going through what are the safety risks. Put on the training wheels. I'm going to start you off with a little bit of time, and then we're going to move up to a little bit more responsibility with it as you've gained knowledge on how to manage this virtual world. Without putting those protections in place, we're sending them off to really have failure that they're not sure how to deal with because we haven't had those times of unstructured play to overcome those things.
Hey friends, you're all allowed to laugh at my voice. I'm gonna try my best. So the term slow growth childhood, it is, what a slow growth childhood is us really hindering children from having that free play. It's at the time where essentially the term is when children are not given the opportunities to kind of grow and develop like usual. Like when Sabrina was talking about riding a bike. I have a younger brother who is 11 years younger than me who never learned how to ride a bike. When I was a kid, that was something that everyone just knew how to do. But now he grew up with a computer in his classroom. He grew up with a TV at home. He grew up with a tablet, things that I didn't have because the 90s were a lot different than the 2000s. But in that, his development was so different. In that, children now don't have as much free play to do things safely because they know their computers. They know technology, which is a wonderful tool, and we have to continue to teach them to use that tool. For example, when children miss out on critical moments that promote independence and creativity and resilience, when they're at school with me and Sabrina, we sometimes see that lack of social skills and social interaction, and research shows that there's an inverse relationship between screen time and gross motor skills. So even your kid learning how to sprint. Oh, I'm gonna run from here to there. And in my neighborhood, we used to race all the time. But if that's not your normal, sometimes your gross motor skills can really be hindered. Even learning cooking skills, learning how to use a knife. Sometimes now, when I was a kid, I was 4, and I know Jen has experience at Greensboro Montessori. Instead of being taught, this is how you do this safely, we're not being taught it at all. One of the best ways to combat this trend of a slow growth childhood is through free play. How many people in here when they were a kid had a parent that said, go outside? Yeah, me too. I had trampolines. I learned how to do front flips. I learned how to play soccer. I ran track. I learned all of these different skills that were only built from me being outside, from me making friends. How many people in here had a mean kid in their neighborhood? But who in here still remembers that mean kid and is like, I don't want to treat someone like that? Exactly. But in that, those social interactions are so necessary. One thing that we don't get with that slow growth childhood because of screens is tone. We don't get to hear, oh, this person was leaning in, this person was using body language, this person had a nice smile on their face. We don't get to see any of that because phone-based childhoods have moved social lives into that constant feedback loop. Have you guys ever posted something online and immediately thought, I wonder how many people are gonna like this? I know I have. Can you imagine that as a teenager? That's really hard, and that feedback loop is hard to break. But I think if we work together to really encourage free play for children, that's one thing that we can continue to grow with them on. These experiences, like free play, allow children to explore their interests and passions. If you're not outside, you don't know that you love soccer. You don't know that you love softball. You don't know that you love grass. You don't know that you love gardening. And so I encourage all of you today, send your kid outside.
So before I get going, though, I do want to just thank you all. Being an outsider coming into the school, seeing just a whole new set of colors in general, like blues instead of oranges, is always a little different and unsettling in a weird way. But thank goodness I went outside to play and learn some social skills, right? To be able to be like, okay, no, this is gonna be good. So I get to dive into the fun, geeky, nerdy side of this book, which is basically the brain. The brain obviously is the house that tells us everything. It allows us to negotiate through the world. It allows us to negotiate with other people. It allows us to negotiate with ourselves, right? Which is kind of the hardest skill of them all. So when we're looking at this more phone-based growth within puberty, we're negotiating with a virtual world. We're negotiating with a fake world. We are arguing with AI. We are arguing with ChatGPT. So what that's doing, right, is so Haight likes to talk, the author of this book likes to pose it the brain as two modes. So we've got this defend mode and we've got this discover mode. Being a slightly shorter person, I feel really hidden behind here. If I need to speak louder, just let me know. But we've got these two modes happening here, and so this defend and this discover. Both of these modes are constantly acting at the same time. They're negotiating. They're having a conversation through all these other things that are happening, right, that are beyond our panel for today. But even right now, you're assessing risk. You're assessing, am I gonna come closer to you and knock your stuff over? Am I gonna hurt this computer as I'm flinging my hands around? Who are these people that I've never seen? I'm always negotiating exits, this and that, right? But we've learned that at some point. We've developed that skill because of these modes negotiating with each other through this more risky play, this outdoor, this play-based learning. So what we're seeing as those two modes negotiate in there, that as we move away from play-based learning, we're moving towards phone-based learning, that we're losing the skills of resiliency. We're losing the coping skills to be able to navigate the world independently. Don't we want that, right? I'm oftentimes telling parents that I'm working with, like, yes, I know we're totally raising the babies, right? We're raising children, but actually, what if we walk around that perspective and we see we're actually preparing adults? Because they're only gonna be kiddos for like this amount of their life, right? You're going to be negotiating with them as adults for way longer than you're negotiating with them as a toddler. Whew, thank goodness. So how this is happening here, so this is kind of in the graph here on your left, as an example of like a college student's first day, right? So discover mode is like, whew, look at all these clubs, all these organizations, all these people, look at all that's happening. Let me be, go home, take the car and the hamper and leave. The other side, right, defend mode is seeing everything as this is scary. I don't know how to do this, I don't want to do this, therefore I'm going to go back behind the podium and I'm going to hide from all of those things. The idea here, based in the defend and the discover mode, as we're raising children, preparing adults, is that we're hopefully creating that safe base, right? This attachment that says, hey, if you break your arm, I'll take you to the doctor. If you trip and fall, we'll find someone that's got a Band-Aid here at school. This person is saying this to you, let me help you figure out words to say back or to go get help. So we're always kind of hoping that that safe base is there, but again, that also included moments where they got to negotiate on their own outside of the house, go out and play. When we're trying to negotiate, say, dress to impress on Roblox, I'm not entirely sure what we're negotiating in that moment because it's not actually very interactive, right? It appears to be interactive, but it's actually very interactive with the mirror, and that's pretty much it, right? It's the how many likes is this gonna get, who's gonna notice this change, this virtual change in me that has nothing to do with me. So this big circle of these modes, right, negotiating in between, finds this really lovely sweet spot in the middle where we do our active learning. And that's in this spot between a brain synapse. So again, geeking out on you here real fast, so hang on. So we've got these brain synapses that are essentially just nerve cells that are saying, they're just yakking all the time at each other, trying to exit, don't exit, go here, it's too dark, it's too light, it's just regulating me all the time. There's this spot that bookends those brain synapses that say fear or newness or unfamiliar, and the other side, which is learned, skill, authentic self, intuition, right? There's something here that I want to get to. The sweet spot in between that's being drastically affected by this more phone-based learning is thrill. Think about that kiddo that you've seen at the pool that's on the edge of the diving board that's got the wild eyes, and they're like, I'm gonna do it. You know, they're like so ready. That's thrill. Look at them the next time, or your kiddos, or your friends, or whoever's enjoying something. That enthusiasm, that eagerness, is that moment of thrill that says, I'm negotiating between discover, kid in a candy shop, and defend. Is this scary? Is it too scary? Is it safe? I don't know, but you know what? I'm gonna go, right? We obviously are not wanting to try and get as many broken bones for our kids as possible, but we do want them to be able to negotiate other spaces without us. And that's the hard part, right? That's the like ouch part where you're like, ooh, it gets me right in the gut. Because it's hard. It's hard to walk away from wanting to keep them all safe. And what I love about this particular research coming out, although it's still developing, is it's not an absence of safety, right? It's not an absence of defend mode. It's just an acknowledgement of, hey, this is way overprotective, and it's actually impacting our evolutionary puberty moments and stages of development for these kids, right? Because they're not able to read the room. They're able to design the virtual room and then exit, literally turn off their screen. That doesn't necessarily create, right, the skills to drive a road trip to and from Tennessee to Maryland, who knows, right? So that's sort of the idea of these two subsystems in there. Enter. So the last little piece of this, as we kind of already went through it all there, but ultimately, this sort of gives the start of, okay, so what do we do here? Like, okay, yeah, but we've also live in a world, right, with a reality that is very virtual. It's very integrated. It's integrated into our curriculum. We're now learning how to virtual through education. So this is kind of sort of a suggestive place of, okay, so here's what we could do. We want to find in these stages of development, specifically puberty is where we're seeing this the most, because there's the lack of coping skills developed through all of this, where how can we maintain the risk, the thrill that I'm gonna jump off the diving board, and also reinforce responsibility. So that's right, so that's where we wanna get to the meat of it. We want to see this less as, okay, we're gonna take away safety. We're not gonna take away safety, but we're gonna increase their inner calculation of safety. So they know what they're doing. They feel confident when they don't step into resiliency in those moments where they don't have you in that exact moment. You as in supervised, all-knowing, better advice-giving human in their world. They're losing the ability to gain intuition, to gain self-growth, to gain, in our education world language, growth mindset. So they're not able to negotiate of their own. And those brain synapses are now over-talking, and now discovery's gone, oh, well, I guess that was fun. Instead of, oh, this was awesome, look at all these scars, it's okay, they'll heal, but this was incredible, and now I know I want to do this for this second career, or I want to do that when I go to school, or I don't want to do school at all and I want to weld. This is what I need to do. So that's sort of the general idea of what's going on in the brain at this time. And I will leave you with one small fun fact before I toss it over to our last one over there, but it takes an average of 600 repetitions for a new brain synapse to create, right? To regenerate, to shift, to regrow, right? That's how they change, is actually through experience, not lectures, not PowerPoints, nothing like that. It's through experience, unless it's when play is in part, and that only takes about 10 to 20. So that's why you know all the songs that you know, because you've listened and you've played and you've laughed and you've giggled and you've enjoyed and you've thrilled in the midst of it, or you raced down the street and you know exactly how to do it with this way, or where to go, or how to cut through, because you did it with play. So hopefully the next time you're with your kiddos, you'll be like, oh, let's gamify this, or let's do something a little bit more fun with it, and it might actually regenerate that even faster.
I'm more of the social person, so I'm going to talk more about that. And I also work with a lot of teens and adolescents, so I'll speak to a little bit of what I see kind of like in practice, just to kind of give you a heads up, because maybe your teen or your child is kind of struggling with the same things. So as far as the phone-based childhood, these are kind of 4 areas that we'll just briefly mention, and the book illustrated well, as far as just the social pieces, the sleep deprivation, the attention fragmentation, and the addiction. So research is going to continue to grow, but I wanted to highlight, like, I know you guys probably see the phones after school. This is just a little bit to know what's happening during the school day. So 97% of our teenagers report that they use phones during the school day. 32 maybe on social media, 26% are on YouTube, 17% are playing games on the phone. So again, I'm not going to throw the teens under the bus, because I know we're at work sometimes, maybe we check TikTok, whatever. But it still gives you an idea as far as like how much screen time potentially that our teens are getting, or our children are getting. And just for back to like the science behind it, you know, like most of the apps are designed to kind of stimulate that pleasure response, so that dopamine is just constantly going, so that happy transmitter. So just keep that in mind as well too, because they're getting reinforcement from this as well, so it keeps going. For the social piece, so it's encouraged for, you know, kids to have a nice balance of, you know, online and offline. Offline will not always look like spending time as a family, sad, but like just encourage, you know, them playing outside, or let's just get vitamin D, period. Let's go outside anyway for a walk. Michael Rich, he did a study for Harvard, and he quoted, "Boredom is the space in which creativity and imagination happen." So, you know, like I see some super talented artists, you know, but they're also switching to digital, and they're drawing on their phones now, or their tablets, you know what I mean? So allow them, if you have like a child that is very gifted in that area, to use pen and paper. Let's see what happens. Social anxiety is on the rise. I will kind of say COVID definitely put it up another tick, but just the fact of having to be face-to-face with someone. Some of our children are really struggling with having that face-to-face instead of online interaction, and difficulty communicating. So small talk, that's going to send their anxiety through the roof. You know, like just a simple hi or bye or my name is so-and-so. So it's really causing a struggle as far as like all of the phone-based childhood experiences they're getting. Sleep deprivation, which you guys may see for yourselves or the team. So the blue light from the screen, so this is going to delay our melatonin to be produced. So that's going to keep us up. So if we have screen time at school, after school, maybe we did get a chance to like watch TV as a family. Just kind of keep that in mind as far as what that may be doing to their like REM sleep, where they get that deep sleep and they get the opportunity to kind of process information that happened through the day and to store it in the memory, which will again affect kind of their attention span. So again, even if they did stay awake in school or in algebra class, you know, like they're not retaining it, so they may truly forget what happened. And then again, just I wanted to point that we do live in an instant gratification type of world where a lot of things are at our fingertips. So that's the expectation too. So like, you know, there's 20 seconds, you know, you got your attention and you're scrolling. So allow that grace for your child as well too. If you notice that their attention span is a little lower, maybe clinically there's some ADHD going on, but maybe it is like anxiety, concentration, all infusion of like technology as well. And then the addiction part just kind of circles back to the dopamine responses, but these are just like some some of the characteristics of addiction. So you have your tolerance. So they're able to do way more hours than their average amount of time online or on their games or on their phones or the tablets. Withdrawal. So maybe we got some little grumpy people, if they're not able to do these things. Denial. So no, I'm not addicted to my game. Like, there's no way I'm addicted to my phone. Loss of willpower. So like, maybe, okay, I'll try to take a break, but this is really, really, really hard. So they're getting anxious and kind of jittery, not being able to do these things. Or the preoccupation. So like, maybe they're super fixated on like one game, and it goes a little bit beyond their favorite game. Like, this is their thing. So they're preoccupied all the time. So these are just some general tips. He calls himself the mediatrician because he used to be a pediatrician as well, but that's his life. So these are just general tips to kind of think of. Again, we cannot tell you guys how to parent, but just be aware of what's happening. So half of all kids and 3/4 of parents feel that they're distracted when they talk to each other. So have those sit downs. Try to do a screen-free meal. Put down your own advice. Avoid the blue lights. Play online games with them. So maybe that can provide some kind of structure instead of it being like forbidden, you can't do this anymore. Let me see what this is all about. Engaging them may help kind of taper down some of that use indirectly. And then also just focus on like the important activities. Avoid anything that's going to be not helpful for them. All right. So the harms based off of genders. So mean girls still exist, but it was noted in the book just about like girls may experience more of that like relational bullying or social comparisons at higher levels than the males or the boys. So we'll dive into that a little bit more of what bullying looks like across genders. So boys are going to be more physical, girls are going to be more verbal. So you may see like the physical intimidation from the boys versus you may hear like the verbal insults or comments from the girls. Boys are going to be more out and open, and girls are going to be secretive. So again, like maybe we turn our heads and unfortunately we have a fight in the middle of the hallway. Girls, may have received a post or what do you call it, a message or a snap, where they were being bullied. So more virtual experiences for the girls in that sense. And then as far as bullying each other, we may see boys bullying other boys and girls mainly girl on girl as far as like their bullying. Bullying typically begins or peaks around 4th grade. By middle school, we all remember those days. It may lead into, things outside of kind of like, clothes or whatever. And this is kind of where the sexual harassment and things like that starts to take ahead. As far as girls as well, this is where it kind of gets tricky. So there's openness, there's awareness, thankfully, of mental health, but sometimes it can be harming in itself, having that mutual symptom. So I get my teens that are self-harmers, whatever form, whatever version. I have the teens that have difficulty regulating their emotions. So have they gotten tips from their friend on how to do that? Unfortunately, yes. Have they been triggered and maybe they've been clean for a while and then they heard their friend relapse? And so now we have, our client in front of us. So coping skills, I always tell teens, like, I'm not here to take away anything that works. And parents kind of give me faces like, I don't want my kid hurting themselves. But I'm like, hey, let's try everything else before we get to that. And usually once you find out the intent behind the self-harm, like whether this is to release or this is to feel something, or maybe I'm punishing myself, we can work with that, and usually that diminishes on its own. So we encourage, obviously, any child struggling, doesn't have to be anything wrong going on, but therapy is great just for them to have that space that's theirs, that they can own and really process anything that may be kind of sitting there with them. Online predators. So again, our girls can be at risk, I think guys too, but like these are going to be the people, behind the screen that are predators, and preying on the children through their games. There may be an app that they're using. So again, that's worst case scenario. We never want that. But these are just some general kind of tips that you can encourage your child to not have any kind of suggestive screen names or photos. If someone is like overly flattering to them, kind of be wary. Don't talk to anyone as far as like that is probing to be super personal or get your personal information. Keep in mind that, again, we don't know who is truly behind the screen. Never arrange to meet with them outside, beyond online. And again, like, be open, allow that safe space for them to let you know, like, hey, I have this person, I'm not sure, they're, bothering me online, or they're, asking me for my address, so allow that safe space for them to talk to you guys and trust you guys. I'm sorry if I'm rambling. All right, and then the last little piece, this is more about like our boys kind of immersing into the virtual world and struggling a little bit, or just getting a little disconnected from the real world. So this was a survey that was done. Again, it just focused on ages 13 to 17. But there was 85% of teens that reported that they do play video games. Half of those said that it was at least once a day, and 4 in 10 identified as like a true gamer. So it did bring out some positives. So yes, they were able to gain some social experience. They did make friends. That's awesome. It was able to help with their problem solving, but they did see some negative effects when it came to their sleep. They also experienced bullying, and some, I think it was offensive names that they were called during that time. So this just kind of illustrates, again, kind of like some of the subsets that they evaluated, so you can see how it can hurt or help. You know what I mean? So that's why we encourage to kind of like find that balance that's going to work for you and your family, because I don't think it's realistic to take it away, because it can be beneficial, but just be mindful of like what the gaming experience, if you have a gamer, or if you have, a child that's using a lot of screen time, kind of what benefits are they getting out of that. And I know you guys probably have more Gen Z, but Gen Alpha is projected to be one of the largest generations. And so these are just kind of like predictions to keep in mind, because the book highlighted as far as like how some boys are moving away from that like traditional, like, I'm growing up to be a husband, I'm growing up to be a provider, so these may factor into that as well. So again, more entrepreneurs, as far as like the technology, just being immersed in social networking, very more like independent. And then the coddling bullet 4, the coddling by the parents. So again, like my colleague said, as far as making sure that we're giving them that space to grow and to, challenge their own selves and learn basic skills. All of that can be a hindrance as far as developing into those productive adults. So, I think it's back on you.
try and make this short. So, the phone-based life affects people spiritually by blocking and counteracting these 6 spiritual practices. But in that, who in here has been told, you're a good multitasker? Do you know that your brain cannot do that? It's not possible. And so we forget to kind of practice stillness and focus, because for a long time we were taught to strive to be the best multitasker. To be the best version of ourselves is doing the most. We were taught that productivity was all that we had to aim for, and perfection, not progress, not practice. Constant connectivity through smartphones leads to a fragmented sense of self. So when we're thinking of shared sacredness, when we're thinking of embodiment, when we're thinking of being slow to anger and quick to forgive, has anyone in here online ever read a comment and immediately you're like, that lady is just so mean? Immediately. But again, we don't have tone. We don't have any of those wonderful things. And not only that, we're introspecting on what is my sense of self? Who am I? And not letting the internet to define that for us. When we have a fragmented sense of self, individuals find it challenging to engage in meaningful contemplative practices. We get too distracted and end up not doing anything because, well, our thoughts are too divided. Has anyone in here ever heard of the term ADHD paralysis? So what that can look like is when you have a million things to do and you're just looking at the list like, this is the list. Wow, that list is getting longer by the second. This is the list. But in that, we're just looking at the list because our thoughts can feel so divided. In that, we don't have that internal self-talk to say, I'm capable. To say, oh, I like this. I know what I'm doing. A lot of times, our inner voice is someone that we care about. So for me, my inner voice is my twin sister. She was always very encouraging to me. You can do this. You're awesome. And so even me now during the day, I constantly hear her voice saying, you're awesome. You can do this. This is hard, but get up. I don't care. Do what you got to do. But when we have a virtual world, what is that voice? Sometimes it's not mom or our friend or our favorite teacher. Sometimes it's just the comment that we saw. Sometimes it is just something that we read, an article where we didn't really get to understand tone. So teaching them to focus, teaching them to have no distractions. How many people in here meditate? Isn't it really hard? It is. When you are trying to silence out noise, especially me, I have 3 small children. They are 5, 3, and 6 months old. There's noise everywhere, all the time. But giving myself those moments of stillness and learning to focus not only lets me determine who am I, but what do I need? What are the things that I'm good at? What are the things that I want to do and don't want to do? A lot of your children in here are in lower school. You will probably hear, Miss Allen told me to self-advocate. And in that, I've heard a lot in the last few weeks, what does that mean? But in teaching them to focus, I also teach them to say, what are your boundaries? What are the things that you don't want people to say to you? What are the things that you like and you want people to know that they like? And how do we build that social interaction to tell them? But we do that through taking the time with ourselves to focus and having a very spiritual relationship with ourselves to say, oh, this is who I am. This is what I like. This is what I don't like. This is the tone that I learn best with. This is the things in a classroom that I learn best with. I learn best in a very tactile way, and sometimes auditory things are hard. But when we give ourselves time and space to focus, we find that awe in nature. We find awe in classroom experiences. We find awe in how wonderful Miss Kiever is or Miss Holly's smiling face in the morning. We get to really be present and say, what is really making me feel this awe? What are the things that I enjoy? Now, when we are taught that productivity and to always go and go, we raise our levels of cortisol naturally, which really give us this feeling of being on edge, which makes us angrier and makes us feel like less present people, which then leads us to multitasking more or trying to, or having that lack of ability to focus even more. And Sabrina's going to tell you about how to combat that.
Well, I also want to talk about, when we talk about that stillness and focus, I don't know if any of your students came home from school in October. We celebrated, earlier in October, we celebrated World Mental Health Day. And on that day, we did a simple act of the first thing in the morning. We took a moment of silence. And for some kids, that seems like a really, really long time to be quiet for a whole minute. And we walked them through a breathing exercise. And it was shared with us that some students went home and said, I love that. Can we do that every day? So it's something as simple as that to try to teach them at a very young age that this very small, simple act can actually redirect your entire day by just being able to focus and be more present. How many people have read this book yet? Well, if you haven't read it, I totally recommend that you do read it. But when you do read it, I have so many notes because like this book is chock full of information and stats and numbers, and it's like on overload, but it's like so good that you can't put it down and you want to keep reading it. Then you read it again because it's like, oh, I found something new this time. I found something new this time. So there's a lot of really interesting information in this. And one of the other parts in this chapter that I really pulled out was being slow to anger and quick to forgive. This is something that our students struggle with because of the lack of social skills and because of not having that free play and problem solving and all of those things. So as Jen talked about with play, to remember things so much easier when we play and when it's tactile. And so I believe in multisensory counseling because you got to put your hands on it, you got to feel it, you got to do something that will make a memory and make it concrete for you. And so even in my private practice, not only does this work with really little kids, but also adults. So I thought maybe we would play a little bit to talk about how we deal with being quick to anger and slow to forgive sometimes. That when, even in lower school, last year one of our words was forgiveness. And we walked every single student in lower school through what a four-step apology looked like and how important it was to do the four-step apology because we all mess up and we're all going to make mistakes. And sometimes we get anxious, we make more mistakes, and then we feel regret afterwards. And all of that takes us out of being mindfulness and present, right? So really walk through what that looks like because, you know, if someone came in and said something really mean and nasty to me and then they come up to apologize to me and they're like, sorry, and like walk away, I mean, that doesn't really feel like they're sorry, right? So we really teach them and walk through how important it is to really say what you're sorry for and why you're sorry for it and how you're going to try not to do it next time and ask for that forgiveness, right? So one of the things that I like to do with kids to express this is just a simple string. And we talk about a fuse. So I'll show them like a one string. And I've got a slightly smaller string. And then I've got a pretty small string. And we'll talk about if this was a fuse. Well, if this was a fuse and I lit it on fire, this one's going to burn up the slowest or the fastest? The fastest. Well, our students tend to have a very short fuse. And what happens when they have that short fuse is that they blow up and then they say something that they didn't even mean to say. I call it word vomit. Word vomit comes out of their mouth. They talk a lot and then they're like, oh my gosh, why did I say that? Now I'm going to go to the office, we're going to be in trouble. You know, all the things, right? So we talk about it's really, this would be a great fuse to have, right? If this fuse caught on fire, then I have a lot of time to think about what is my plan? How do I get to safety? What do I do next? How do I recoup, right? And so, but this seems like it's really unattainable, right? Because that would be really hard to go from a very short fuse to a very long fuse. So we just talk about steps. How can we just grow our fuse a little bit longer so that next time we can do it better? And then we can do it better the next time and the next time. Because how many mistakes do you make in a day? I make a lot of mistakes in a day. And so it gives us lots of opportunity to practice. So if y'all like soda? If you have teenagers or young kids in your house who are like, listen to me, if I like shake up a bottle of soda and open it. Well, I should have said, hey Tracy, you open that already? Why do you not open it? It's going to explode, right? And so we talk about when we have a really short fuse, it's like being shook up like a bottle of soda, and when we open it, we explode. All your kids that will come back in after we talked trying to teach these kids, even as young kids, are like, this is a lifetime skill. This is something that you're going to use always. So if we practice when we're little, we get better and better as we're older, right? So a lot of them are talking about these three things. Who knows what this is? It is a filter, right? So most of the time kids can relate to that there's a filter in their car. So when they turn the air conditioning on when it's really hot outside, and they get to have that nice, cool air come through, this is what blocks like dirt and leaves and all the stuff from coming in, right? Well, we can't always take the people out of our life that say mean and ugly and nasty things that are frustrating to us, but we can use a filter, right? Like let's say that there's someone in class who's not very kind to us, but they also are the line leader, and so they're like, hey, it's time to go to lunch. Well, I want that to come through my filter, like the nice cool air, like, oh, I don't want to be late for lunch, or oh, it's time to push in my chair, or oh, it's time to get a Mandarin. I want to hear that information, but when they say all that nasty stuff, we want to keep all that dirt and junk and all that bad stuff on the other side. But sometimes it gets really, really hard. So what is this? The shield. So sometimes we need to put our shield over our filter so that we can block that thing. So we can block things that aren't kind of. So if we imagine like this is a really something that's awful, it's going to make you feel so bad, it's going to a group chat. Are we over group chats? Somebody said something nasty in the group chat, right? So if this is a nasty comment, throw that at me. I can block that so that next time it's not going to hurt so much and I can use my filter. So I can hear if there's good information there, like, oh, tomorrow I'm supposed to bring my volleyball uniform, turn it in. But then something else is really, well, I can't believe that you wore that today and that was so ugly. I can decide, do I need to block it? Do I need to filter it? Or do I just need to practice growing my feet? And so those are some of the ways that we work with the students to try to talk about how do we combat this being slow to anger and quick to forgive. And it's really important that even when people do those things and we have to use our shield, teaching them how to show that grace and forgiveness so that we can grow as a person for ourselves. It's not necessarily for that other person, it's for ourselves, right? So some of the things that we are doing in school when we talk about what schools can do now, some of the things, some of you may already know this, some of you may not know this, is that there are places that are establishing phone-free schools, period. Where it's like they are not even allowed on the campus. We are not there yet, but we've made a lot of headway this year. So like in our lower school, we really recommend that they do not bring smartwatches or phones to school, period. Because there's just not really a need for it and they're not on their devices throughout the day. In middle school, we had a brand new thing that we tried this year and it has been amazing. There were people that were worried about it and some students that were worried about it. I'm going to tell you what, these kids have been able to be brought back to that mindfulness and that focus because it's a way. So in every middle school classroom, we have what's called a phone box, and it's attached to the wall. Students come in, if they bring a phone or a smartwatch or any kind of device, and they put it in that phone box during the day, and then it's locked. So all day long, it's just locked away. It's safe, it's sound, they don't have to worry about it. It takes the anxiety out of it. Where's my phone? Did I lose it? Who took it? Is somebody going to grab it? Is somebody going to see something on it? Is it going to go off in class and then I'm going to get in trouble? All the things, right? So we've kind of decreased that anxiety while making them more present and productive because they're not worried about that technology. And then they get it back at the end of the day. As they grow older, though, and they get into upper school, we give them a little bit more responsibility with it, right? So they do have their phones, and they're allowed to have their phones, but in every class there's a little bucket, a phone with phone slots in it, that they can put their phone at the front of the class and they leave it there for the remainder of the class so that they can focus and be present in the class. So it's really important for us to be able to do these things to also help build some resilience. Now, the fact of the matter is that we know phones are not going away. We did have a teacher who had a great suggestion of, putting them all in a rocket and sending them out of the atmosphere. However, it's not going away. And so really what our role is and what our job is to really try to teach them the resilience, the self-control, regulation, and how to put limits on those devices so that they can use them effectively. Because let's face it, there are some really great things about technology that help us stay more organized and help us to do the things that we need to do throughout the day. I knew I could not live without my calendar on my phone because I just do whatever it tells me to do, right? Like I said, to be here today at 6 o'clock, so I did. But it is very important for us to teach those limits and those controls. So as I was talking about earlier, we don't just hand the keys over to give them to our students. We really want to teach them about those things. So on your tables, you have 3 different documents that we put together for you, because I don't know if you know that there are some really amazing things that you can do if you have decided to give your child a phone. Now, there are some recommendations. Some schools out there do a wait till 8, which says please have them on the phone until they're 8. There are other places that say don't give it to them until middle school. There's other things out there that'll say they should not have a phone, social media, or anything else until I know most kids before 16 currently have those things. Now the next generation that might be different because as we're learning more, we're putting more information out about this type of things. But for right now, we know that it's there. So this just walks you through how to put some parent controls on your phone, the one that says guide for setting parent controls on iPhones and Android phones. You can actually go in and you can control your kid's phone from your phone. It's really an amazing thing. I will say that Apple, and then I became an Apple person, but I really liked my Android. But Apple does a really, really good job of having parent controls. You can get them on both, but there's just a few extra steps with Android. There are even things like, let's say you give your student a phone, but you don't want them to have the internet. You can actually just take Safari right off the phone. They don't see it as an icon. They don't see it grayed out. It's just not there. Well, what that does is all these fabulous group chats that the kids get into, if someone were to send them a link or a video or something, and they don't have the internet and you're taking that off the phone, it doesn't open. It just says no access allowed, which is really great because I know in my own experience, I have a 16-year-old, a 14-year-old, and an 11-year-old. And when my 16-year-old first got a phone, within the first week of having that phone, they were sent something that was extremely inappropriate. Now, he couldn't open it because I'd taken the internet off of his phone and I'd put all the things on it. Now, it took me, I'm not gonna lie, it's like a full-time job, right? Because there's a lot of things you gotta learn and there's new stuff coming out all the time. But it took me a while to just give it to him. It took me a few days to get everything set up on the phone that I wanted to have set up on the phone, but I was so thankful because I went to the pool that weekend and one of the moms put her phone in front of me and said, "Did you see this video?" And I was like, "I was not prepared for that. I didn't want to see that." And so then I was so thankful that my student, my child, had not seen that. So there's a lot of things that you can do to put on devices so that you can make sure that they are not seeing. A famous phrase in my household that my kids are probably so tired of me saying is you can't unsee it. Once you see it, you've seen it, and you can't unsee it. And so I always think about we're trying to protect their eyes and their information that they're getting, and it's like we're their filter, right? So by being a filter, we can do some really great things by putting those parameters on their phones. The other two documents are things that talk about the most dangerous apps that are out there right now. And this is a list that gets put out every year. Even the FBI puts out a list. And guess what is always on the list, or at least it has been for at least the last 5 years? Roblox. Roblox is on there. And the reason that Roblox is on there is because it's a kids app. So where do predators go? They're not at the park because we supervise our kids so much that they're not at the park playing unsupervised. So now they're unsupervised on these apps and games, and that's where predators are going to look for some of those things. So that's just to give you some awareness about some of those dangerous apps, as well as safe apps for students to use. Some of them may not look as good, but even if you look on here, there is an educational version of Minecraft, so that's a more safer version to have. If your students have things like Instagram or Snapchat or things like that, there are parent controls that you can put on there. Even if you have Instagram and you're giving your student Instagram, you can actually put your Instagram account also in yours. So kind of like how Canvas, you can toggle between students. You can also do that on Instagram so that any message that they get through Instagram or any ding that they get through Instagram, you also get on your phone. So there's a lot of really great information out there, and we'll continue to try to provide more and more things like that so that you can figure out what are the new things. And, I also, another thing that I say in my house is that it's my phone, not your phone. I pay for it. So they know that at any moment in time, I could take their phone and I could look through their phone and just make sure that everything's all okay on my phone. And some people might say, well, you have a 16-year-old, is that okay? Well, it's all about stair-stepping it, right? So we give more information and more responsibility as they do well with a little bit, and we increase it along the way, right? So my 16-year-old has more privileges than my 11-year-old will have, and that's just by design, and it has to work for your family, and it has to be what you're comfortable with, but I will say it takes a lot of time, but I would not trade that for anything. It has been so beneficial, and it's taught them so much, and it also has built our relationship, because they'll be like, oh my gosh, I saw that doggy video that you're watching on your phone, and it's hilarious, will you send it to me, or whatever. There's a lot of bonding that can be brought over that too if you're putting those things in place to help with parameters to help keep them safe.
Listening to this as a parent with a 5-year-old, I'm like, no, not yet. But we're up here. You guys have heard all night us telling you, send your kid outside. But I want to give you some more things that you can do to be present with your child, to be present in their internet experience. We know it's not going away. If anything, at school they're going to be using technology more. We just want them to do that safely to end that cycle of anxiety. So some things that you can do. Cook together. Prepare a meal. I wish I could tell you how many teenagers and young adults I have in my office, in my private practice, that say, I don't know how to cook. I'm like, your mama didn't teach you? I'm like, no. I'm like, your grandma didn't teach you? No. Your neighbor didn't teach you? And I'm like, no. But some of my best childhood memories were just in the kitchen with my grandma, in the kitchen with my mom, in the kitchen with my dad, learning how to peel apples when I was 4. And I was so scared of just a little peeler. That's when peelers were like new and a thing. But I was so afraid of it. My dad was just like, it's an apple, peel it, you're fine. But in that, that's promoting that independence in them. Game nights. Did anyone in here have game nights as a kid? Oh, I'm aggressive with Monopoly. Oh man, Monopoly got real in my house. But playing board games, playing card games. I'm not gonna lie, my child is 5 and learning how to play spades. It's fine. But he loves learning these things. In that, you can learn. He learned his numbers just playing Go Fish with a deck of cards when he was 3, and having just that experience with me and his dad. And it was something we could all do together. Reading together. I know all of the lower elementary people in here, reading with your kids. We see phenomenal results in their reading comprehension and their letter naming the more that they are at home reading. But also, even now, we created a custom book for one of my kids for Christmas, and it was a book about experiences with their dad. And so they could read through it, but they're like, oh, look, that's us at the park. Oh, look, that's us when we went to Carowinds. Oh, look, that's us when we went to the movies. All these little experiences, but it's a book that they get to see themselves in. But they're also learning about the world. We learn history through books. We learn about each other through books. We learn about social interactions through books and how other people and these characters navigated these things. Road trips. You have little kids, sorry. But road trips can be wonderful, playing I Spy in the car, having them just learn to be aware of what's around them. Hey, let's play I Spy. Let's get in the car. Tell me how many McDonald's you can name between here and Thomasville. Tell me how many Walmarts you can see in a 30-mile radius. If you're driving through High Point and Greensboro, it's a lot. Volunteering together. Can you imagine the social interactions that you get to see at a soup kitchen, at United Way? Even here we had our relief for Western North Carolina, where all the kids came together and they put the boxes on trucks and everyone brought things together as a school. But in that, it was one big social interaction of everyone coming together, to use our last month's character word of compassion, and working together for a bigger cause. Art projects. All the art in my house is something that we made. So I'm sorry for anyone who ever comes to my house. But art projects with your kids, let them use that creativity outside of a screen. Or maybe with it. Maybe if they really enjoy graphic design, let's not hinder that. Maybe that's something that they want to do for a career one day. How can we use this tablet to draw? How can we use a pen and paper to draw? How can we use the resources around you to really connect you to what your interests are? Does anyone in here used to stargaze? I used to love, I'm from the country, obviously, but stargazing outside, teaching them about space, about the things that are in the sky in your backyard. I live in Thomasville, so we actually can see stars. Or out here in Davidson County, you can look up, you can see stars, you can learn about constellations, but all of those are helping them build wonderful experiences with you guys. Family meetings. So a lot of times in my practice, when I talk about family meetings, my kiddos are like, yeah, we have those when I'm in trouble. But in my house, we have a family meeting every week. It used to be every day, but life happens, I get it. And so on Friday nights, we come together, we order pizza, we sit down, and we go over not how was your day. I try not to ask how was your day. What was the most interesting thing that you remember this week? Helping them build that executive functioning, that working memory and focus. And you name 3 things that were really interesting to you this week. But also, you name 3 really hard moments. They could have nothing to do with me. But in that, that's teaching them that not only can they have hard moments, but that you do too. And that they can learn to cope with them as we model it. So, for example, I had a hard moment where I fell going out of my house. And my kids were right there. And it was raining and it was wet. I had on work stuff. We're heading to school. And my son was like, was that your hard moment? I said, yeah. He's like, well, you picked your bag up and you put everything in the car and you changed your pants. I said, yeah, you're right. I said, you know what, Denver, you're right. That's exactly what I did. He was like, but why was that still a hard moment? I was like, it doesn't negate the fact that it was frustrating. Two things can be true. I can be really frustrated that that happened and also have all the tools to just keep going. And so us being knowledgeable about, hey, let me share my hard moments with you. Let me share hard moments that I'm having on the internet. Your aunt commented on something that I posted and I can't really read that tone. And so I think I want to call her so that I can hear her tone of voice, so that I can hear if we have a conflict, how to resolve it. And so I feel like I have ease in my close circles, but being honest with them about how we experience technology. I think a lot of times younger kids look at us like we're just ancient, like, oh, you don't know Facebook, you don't know Roblox, you don't know Minecraft, but we do. And in that, maybe even say, oh, you're right, I don't know that. Can you help me learn about it? Can you tell me about it? Sports. I see I'm not sure. You're probably like, yeah, sports or physical activities. Oh my goodness. I also, in my slew of children, I also have the one who does not like going outside. And I'm like, well, we're gonna climb a tree and we're gonna do something. But in that, even if it's like, I don't like being super physical, maybe gardening. Maybe how can we plant things? How can we count clouds and learn about the different types of clouds? How can we really just get some vitamin D? And what that does is it also reduces those cortisol levels. Getting that vitamin D does wonderful things for mood. And we see that here with your children before and after recess and how even just that activity level can help regulate their body so much. Reflective journaling for our older kiddos that can read and write. I even model for my kids at the end of the day. They see me grab my journal and walk to my room like, oh, it's my time. And I had my son ask, well, what are you writing in it? The things I can remember about my day, the things that were good, the things that were bad, the things that were somewhere in between. I try not to just put my to-do list because I get reminded of that all day. But really reflective, asking yourself hard questions. What do I have questions about today? What is something that I can ask mom? What is something that I can ask dad? What do I want to learn about my friend? Hey, I have a new kid in my class. I don't remember his name. Do I want to ask his name today? How do I ask, what's your name? You guys would be shocked in these post-COVID children who just play and play and play. And I've even asked my kindergartner, oh, I saw you playing with that person on the playground. What's their name? I don't know. I'm like, you play every day? He's like, yeah. But you haven't asked what their name is? He said, am I supposed to? I'm like, is this life? But in that now, every time he'll come home, he's saying, Mommy, I asked, hi, how are you? And I said, my name is Denver. And they said their name was Miss Holly. And we went to the slide. And I'm like, okay, but those very basic things can be taught in just that physical play and them getting outside and playing sports, but also in that reflective journaling of like, oh, I had this really awkward encounter today with Miss Keeper, and she probably thinks that I am a really wild person because she knows I went to the Usher concert last night and my voice is gone. But in that, I also love that now all of my coworkers know something really fun about me, and they know that I'm a person and a therapist and a school counselor and a mom. But in that, sometimes that reflective journaling and teaching them that when they're kids teaches them about their own self-identity. Listening to music from different genres. My child loves country music, and it was not my favorite. But now, if I have to listen to one more Morgan Wallen song, we're gonna have problems. And he also loves Tennessee whiskey, which he was found singing on the playground. But listening to music is one of those things that's also a way for you to bond with your kid. I love that. We will sing some Shania Twain in the car from here to Thomasville, and he will come to school saying, man, I feel like a woman. And I'm like, you're 5, but okay. But in that, he has this wonderful example of like, oh yeah, my mom really likes this song, and she listens to this in the car, and it's also just kind of fun and playful and something we can do together. Visiting museums or cultural events. I think we live in a really interesting area that is rich in history, in Quaker history, in Civil War history, in all of these things. I did a tour of Gopher College where they did a whole tour on how the Quakers helped during the Underground Railroad, and I took my kids with me, and they're like, there's not a railroad. That's okay. But in them learning about the history of their community makes them feel like they're a part of it. But not only that, they get to see the things that you're interested in. They get to learn about your history. I also had my kid ask me, Mommy, were there buses when you were at school? I'm like, how old do you think I am? Mommy, did you have cars when you were a kid? And I'm like, I'm not that old, but he's like, but cars are new. I'm like, yeah. He's like, but you're not new. All right, that's okay. But visiting museums and having those cultural experiences with them, having kids learn about where you come from, gives them that sense of, oh, not only do I feel like I belong, I feel more relaxed in the sense that I know that I belong in this community. I know that I belong at Westchester. I know that I belong at New Garden Friends. I know that I belong in High Point. I know that I belong in North Carolina. For anyone who moves out of state, having them feel like they know their community, they know the people in it, and they know the things that are happening here can really significantly reduce those feelings of anxiety in young kids. And like Sabrina was saying, technology-free evenings are hard. I know sometimes I get home and I just want to put on TV and make dinner and have 10 minutes of quiet. And sometimes it's not going to be every day. Sometimes it's going to be once a week. Sometimes it's going to be 2 times a week. But in that, having those meaningful experiences where you can add that gardening, where you can add all of those little pieces to teach your child how to have free play, how to be independent, is wonderful for them. It's wonderful for their brains. It's wonderful for their growth. And we are so thankful that you guys are all in collaboration with us to help give them that. Now, I do want to offer time for questions. I know you guys might have a bunch, but I'm going to hand it over to you guys.